This is the third installment of our Kingdoms of Men Army review, the characters.
All right, Sean, we're back doing our next installation of the Kingdoms of Men, and this one is on characters.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Characters to me are, I mean, they're the most important unlock in a lot of ways because you can do a lot of different things with them.
I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing is, especially just the last few weeks, you're seeing a lot more people running lone characters, especially in list. And in the past, I really don't think that that was the norm. And I believe a lot of it is just in response to how much shooting has been put on the table.
I think that's a good point. That said, we went to Axe Grinder last year, and I think that some of the, in my opinion, some of the best players and the player who won did have a very strong contingent of disruptive characters.
Yes.
And I think one of the reasons for that is that they're good against shooting because the 1 point of damage will disrupt the shooting. They're also good against flyers. And of course, they're good against characters that are going after your units. So, their disruption, their counter disruption, as good as all these unlockable units are, heroes seem to be the one that I'm always maxing out on, and I think that's why.
I agree. And like I said, their utility, for some reason, I mean, I've been playing online and face to face, but the utility of single characters to me is greatly increased in third edition. And in second edition, I really didn't even think. I thought of the characters as being a source for inspiring and maybe something to knock a wound off or two, and not really thinking of them as a crucial part of the army list. Okay, just want to go back and talk a little bit about the use of the Indomitable Will on certain characters. And Sean, could you share with us which three characters can use Indomitable Will?
Well, it looks like it's really only an option for the hero on the Pegasus, which now is a different hero, and the assassin. So some of the units, like the general on a Pegasus, where I'd like to take that for 5 points if I could, I can't. And others, of course, like the new instigator, it wouldn't help him that much anyway because he's already fearless.
Well, I mean, the assassin, though, he's a guy that if he got accidentally wavered, he becomes useless for a turn. And if you could rally him and let him go off, especially with the prevalence of shooting, I mean, it's almost impossible to shoot him and hurt him anyway because of all of his skills, but it could happen. Maybe a lightning bolt or something like that could do it. So his ability to keep moving and keep doing things, I believe it's vital to at least put it on him. If I have a hero on a Pegasus, I would really consider that as well. Maybe not a regular hero. It just depends on what role I have for him.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable way to spend 5 points, but with these characters are all, the heroes all have this 10-12 nerve. They're likely to just break and run anyway. So I don't put much stock in the difference between 10 and 12. It's so low. If they tangle with anything serious, they're gone. But I wouldn't hesitate to spend 5 points, especially on the assassin, like you said.
All right, let's talk about something that didn't happen in third edition for the Kingdoms of Men. The Kingdoms of Men did not gain an aura. Like most of the other armies, I've noticed that they have at least one aura providing character or ability. And some of them are fairly limited. I mean, some of them are only for characters on foot and things like that. But the Kingdoms of Men didn't get it. But I really want to think about that the very inspiring is probably one of the better abilities that the Kingdoms of Men have.
I agree completely. Very inspiring is amazing. It does create awkward situations sometimes in army building because there are so many ways to get inspiring and very inspiring. Sometimes I at least feel like, as I mentioned before, it's very easy to use up all your hero slots. You want some of them to be disruption. You want some of them to be in support. And it's easy to cover your whole army in very inspiring more than once, kind of accidentally, if that makes sense.
Sure.
The general is very tempting. We've got wizards with the talisman. We're going to get to this stuff in a minute, but it almost becomes a problem. Like if I could save points and just be inspiring, would you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, in my Ratkin army, very inspiring would be, you know, in second edition would have been a detriment because the units that I really wanted to run would have stayed. And so I don't think with the Kingdoms of Men army, I really don't think that, you know, that because like they kind of nerf some of our chaff a little bit. I'm not going to complain about it too much, but on the other hand, you and I both know that there's times when you want that unit to break so that you can take advantage of it. And very inspiring keeps them in the game, you know, sometimes when you don't want them to be in the game. It's especially true if you have militia troops and you're fighting other crappy troops. It's a slap fight. You might fight the whole game and not break each other. And that's what very inspiring is actually to your detriment. Do you agree?
It is oddly. Now, to be clear, I mean, this is one of the few armies where you can spend 75 points and have the support component of your army locked down with ASB on foot with a loot. You've got your Bane chant, you've got practically your whole army inspired, and you can, you know, repeat it with a wizard and the talisman if you want. So I love that we can get the leadership component of our army handled so easily. It's just that I think it's very easy to end up doing that with too much redundancy. Once you start adding in Indomitable Will and, you know, so many different sources of very inspiring, sometimes it feels a little bit like you're paying for value that you don't need.
I agree. I mean, one of the things that I've seen online, not face to face, is you could just give a general, for example, on foot. You could just give him the loot, and he becomes basically your general. You're very inspiring, and a magic user all in the same divide in the same model. You know what I mean? And that way, you're not having to buy a ASB, the general, you know, for whatever abilities you want from him. Yeah. And the loot. So you just put the loot on him, and now you've basically got one model that fills all those roles at once.
Yeah, and he's mighty, and he has 5 attacks. I mean, sure. It's sort of a question of how many eggs and how many baskets, but I mean, he would do it all, right?
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the general. So he comes in one of the few characters I've seen in any list that comes in 4 flavors. He comes on foot, he comes on a horse, he comes on a Pegasus, and he's on the winged beast. I mean, there's 2 out of those that are really good, and the other 2 are like, eh. So let me know tell me what you think about using the general.
Well, it's like Baskin Robbins. There's 31 flavors, but there's never 31 good flavors.
Absolutely.
There's some gross ones. The general on a Pegasus is too many points for a hero on a Pegasus. I just can't see how I'd use him. And I know there are corner cases where you'd wish you took him, but realistically, if I want to have him flying, I want to do as much damage as I can, and that's going to be the winged beast. And if I want a throwaway guy, it's going to be the hero on a Pegasus. As far as the horse or not, I don't know. I think that the non-winged beast general, his main value is in what we just discussed. He's got 5 attacks and he's mighty. So he's got very inspiring. You could give him the loot or something. He could be this like super support character that can kind of do it all. And to me, that's just a question of how many hero slots do you have? What are you using them on? Do you need to put multiple roles into one character? Or do you want to try to put, you know, more of your eggs into different baskets just to make it harder for the enemy to disrupt your camp, your support stuff? So as far as I'm concerned, the general is just one option among many for how to organize that.
I just want to say, my friend, he uses the general on a horse, and that guy's like 120 points. But he gives him, whichever the magic item is, it makes him brutal, and I'll think of it in a minute. But he does that, and he charges into
the pipes.
The pipes, yeah, and he charges into battle to add brutal to whatever his guys are fighting, and I find that it works very well. I mean, that's the only reason I could see using a general like that. But, you know, I mean, the thing is, 5 attacks, he has that item, and I think it helps. I mean, he'll do a couple of wounds, and then effectively with brutal, that's 3 wounds on top of whatever your horde, your knights, or whatever you're fighting with, you know, adds up. And it does work. It's very effective. My issue with the general mounted is he's 120 points. At 120 points, I get the captain, which is way better than the general as far as support. Do you agree?
I do, but he's better, but he's also different. You know, you can give the general an item. So, you know, Vega's doing something you can't do with to captain, he's doing something unique. I kind of balk at the price tag, but I like this idea. I like the creativity. I like to have so many choices. And depending on your army, general may fit the bill. I just, the one thing I think, like you, I just don't see how him on a Pegasus works.
Oh no, no, that guy's a waste of. I mean, I looked and I thought it was a misprint, and so I looked up. You know, I have both the PDF and the book, and it's the same in both. So it's obviously not a misprint. Now, do I think it's going to be changed the next time that something comes out? I think it will, but you know, we can't rely on that. You know, that opinion right now. You know, our opinion is it's wrong, but you know, that doesn't help anybody. So let's finish talking about the general, and who do you want to talk about next? Let's think of something cool.
Well, I want to talk about the winged beast real quick, and I know you want to move on, but the winged beast does give a value add to Kingdoms of Men. I mean, it's the closest thing we have to a dragon, and you know, I think in second ed, no one was really using him because he just looked like so much of a worse version of a dragon that it was sort of hard to justify. You know, who's this guy with 6 attacks that, you know, low nerve and all that. And, you know, they made him a little better in this edition. But I think the biggest thing is just players have realized when you do the math, point for point, you know, he's not as good as a hero on a dragon in some of these other armies per model, but for point, yeah, maybe he is. And this is a really flexible unit you can get if you're conservative with the way you use them. You'll almost certainly be able to get flank charges, maybe rear charges, or to really go after support units. That guy's an opportunity, and in some ways, he's a better opportunity than what some of the other armies have that can only choose a big dragon. He's this like a half a dragon in one model. I like him a lot. I'm really interested in him. I have to say, when I've used him, my results are kind of 50-50. Because it's very easy to make bad choices with a general on a griffin or on a winged beast, and so there's a lot of user error, and you know, I almost feel like I have to prorate the value of the character based off of that. You know, if it's easy to screw up, then
Right.
It's not worth as much. But you know, when he's used well, I really feel like he's a good value. Have you had any experience with him, either on the receiving end or the dishing it out?
Well, I mean, the thing is that I like about the new one is it stayed on the small base, not the humongous base that most all the new flying creatures are. So you can really whip him, you know, around for a charge, you know, pretty well because of he stayed on the 50 millimeter base. And I'm with you. I mean, the thing is, if you ever think that your general on a winged beast is going to break literally any unit from the front except a war machine or something like that, you're wrong. It's not going to do it. I mean, he might sit there and fight for a few turns, you know, but he is not going to break anybody, bust anybody down. He's good for 1 or 2 wounds. I mean, that's really all he is. You know, he's not he's you know, you can't sit there and say, well, he's got 7 swings, so he'll do 7 wounds. Well, that's absurd. But I mean, I think that the real benefit to him is changing how people move against your army. In other words, if you've got your hammer units, your line is out there, right? On top of the moving toward the hammer unit, if he's out there on the flank, Sean, they're thinking about not getting flank charged. you know what I'm saying? So they're moving very tentatively, because he's there, and you can't help it. I don't care if it's a unit of gargoyles or whatever those things are called on the table. You cannot just allow something to charge you in the flank. All of a sudden, he's 14 attacks, and now he's as good as a unit of knights almost. You know, he's charging you in the flank. So that to me is the best use for him. And just something else that I said a few days ago, I think I was talking to Vegas. The thing is that Kingdoms of Men, you could have that guy and 2 or 3 other characters and still probably be spending less than some armies spend on their dragon, you know, and their supporting characters. I mean, they're spending 500-600 points sometimes on characters, and you would have a very well-rounded group of characters, including the general on a winged beast, for a relatively small amount of points.
Yeah, I'll probably say this multiple times in this episode, but we run out of slots for heroes before we run out of good ideas. They're cheap. There's so many good, cheap ideas for Kingdoms of Men, and like you said, the Griffin, he's a great one. I have to say, I've charged everything from the front with that guy in double charges, triple charges. That's not how you get the value out of him. It's what you said. It's threatening, threatening flanks, getting actual flank charges. You've got to use him the way you've got to use his strengths. You can't just throw him at something with a unit of knights and think he's going to make a big difference. Could he tip the balance in a fight? Yes. Have I ever seen it happen? No. It's just not enough attacks to do it. So I agree with you completely.
Yeah, he's kind of like the way I feel about the giant sometimes. He's the and guy. In other words, if you charge with the knights and the general on the griffin, or the horde and the general on the winged beast, it'll be effective. It's just he just can't do it by himself. I mean, he has to be with something else.
Yeah. From the front, I don't even know if that's enough. He might have to triple charge. It's real tough.
And something else that, I mean, just the last thing I really kind of want to say about him is some of the really big flying creatures like the Chimera for the Northern Alliance and the Scud for the Rack, and you can almost get 2 general on a winged beast for the price of that one model. Now, those models are very damn good, but having 2 flying characters just gives you more flexibility than them with their one. I mean, they can only impact one thing a turn, where you could potentially impact 2. So I guess that's kind of my summary of the general on the winged beast. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, I don't want to stay here too long, but I agree, and but that goes to sort of the blessing and the curse of Kingdoms of Men. This stuff's so cheap, we run out of slots. So I definitely would rather take 2 winged beasts than 1 dragon in many circumstances. But I'm going to run out of heroes, and we're going to get to why in a minute. There's just so many good choices.
Absolutely.
The thing is if I've got 2, your units that are designed to disrupt my flying units, they can't mess up my 1 dragon with your 1 hero on a horse. Now I've got that's broken into 2 threats. We're talking about controlling their movement by threatening their flanks. I've got 2 ways to do that. I don't just necessarily run them together. I could run one on the right, one on the left. I could do whatever I want, and I think it's more flexible. The problem you run into is how many of these guys can I get on the table when you consider your rule of 3 and your total number of hero unlocks. So, Randy, after getting through the general, I want to talk about the Army Standard Bearer. What are your feelings on that guy? I mean, he's simple.
It is, and the thing is I'm so freaking boring. I run him the same way every time. I give him the loot, Army Standard Bearer. I plant him behind my pikeman, and that's where his life, his whole point in life is to exist right there. And that's my use of the Army Standard Bearer.
Yeah, I agree. The guy is such a great value, and if I only could take 1 character, or I wanted to maximize the points for, my mainline units, I would take 1 Army Standard Bearer on foot with the loot of Insatiable Darkness and call it a day. And the fact that we can do that for 75 points and still have a fieldable army is something to brag about. And on the one hand, on the other hand, you've only got so many hero unlocks. And so sometimes you just, I'm taking a captain, I'm taking a wizard with a talisman, I'm taking a general on a winged beast, and sometimes I'm just not sure if I really need 1 more source of inspiring. But that's the question. He's the discount leader of all discount leaders. It's just, what do you do with your slots?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you saw my last battle report against the Salamanders, but I was looking at the pictures afterwards, and my ASB was standing there, and he had, I think there were 6 units in range of his. Very inspiring. And there's 1 little model standing back there with his little flag waving it back and forth bravely, Like I said, you could leave him with your infantry line and just go do other things. I mean, he'll do what you want him to do. If you're doing hammer and anvil, he just stays there with the anvil part, right? I mean, he didn't have to go anywhere or do anything. He just bolsters your infantry line. Okay, Sean, let's talk about the hero. He really comes in, I guess you would say, 3 flavors: on foot, on horseback, and on a Pegasus. And I've just got to say that I cannot think of any more useless hero than the hero on foot. I mean, he doesn't give you anything. I mean, some people's heroes, for example, the Ratkin one has Rally 1. A bunch of the ones in Northern Alliance have special abilities like that. But our hero, even though he's cheap, doesn't do anything for me. What do you think about it?
Well, as we all know, Hero, who isn't inspiring, is he's a problem. But I do think there's a little bit of potential. This guy is 40 points, and as if you see him simply as a vehicle for a magic item on a character, he's the quickest way to get there. Now, I don't know that there are so many magic items that I'm all that enthused about to use that way, but the diadem is kind of interesting on this guy. To me, if you used him as a point defense, like a discount missile, like short range missile guy for your back row, kind of like Kingdoms of Men's version of the rattling gun.
All right.
In that role alone, I think he does pretty good missile damage for his points at short range in a way that kind of beats out every other Kingdoms of Men unit. But unless you really think you need that 12-inch shooting, 8-shot, good points for the value thing running around right behind your front line, I agree.
So my question to you, thinking about that, why wouldn't you just have a 50-point magic user to do the same exact role?
Well, for 70 points, I can get 8 shots instead of 6, and if I have to charge you because I want to disrupt you, if it's a flyer, the hero might do a wound, and the wizard will not. The wizard won't ever disrupt anyone. So I agree that it's that's similar, but the hero will do more damage, and I'm not sure if it's actually more damage per point. But we get back to this issue where I'm going to use up all my hero slots anyway.
Right.
So I don't just want the most efficient. I want to get the most value out of the slot. And a diadem is more damage than a fireball.
All right. That's fair enough. I don't know if you recall this. This was probably a decade ago, but I wrote 2 tacticas, believe it or not, on using the Pegasus. The Pegasus captain, we call him the battle captain. This was in Warhammer, though. And here he is again, one of my favorite models in our nice Kingdoms of Men list. And I feel he's every bit as versatile as the one in my Warhammer days. Am I right?
I agree. We used to call him the Captuses.
There you go.
I remember your Tactica. Yeah. I like him. And like the general, he can take a magic item. He's not a special character, so to speak. He's not the captain. He can take what he wants. That said, I think there's one, you almost can't say enough about how useful and versatile this guy is for his points, but I can say one bad thing about him. And that is 3 swings isn't always going to do it in melee. His best and highest use is this guy flying around, and he's effectively mighty because he's not a monster. He can stop charges. He can disrupt things. He can get in your back ranks. But I don't always know if I charge something that I'm going to do a wound, force a nerve check, and disrupt a thunderous charge unit or a shooting unit. And that's because 3 swings numerically won't get me into that range where I'm 90% sure that I will deal 1 wound. So that to me is the math problem with the hero on a Pegasus. And the solution to me is that you've got to take him with some kind of magic item to bolster that if you want to get that disruption out of him. And I think that's probably the Blade of Slashing. It could be the Blade of the Beast Slayer. But, you and I have both used him with the diadem pretty effectively because it makes him more versatile. But, and I know that does, that's not a melee item, but there's so much value there, it's hard to argue it. I really feel like you can't rely on him unless you give him that extra boost. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. I think the one that I use sometimes on my General on Winged Beast is the Mace of Crushing, and I think it would fit on him just as well. Just to add, like you said, to get to 1 wound that you could absolutely count on, because you need that to keep a flyer from flying, to keep shooters from shooting. So you have to have something. I agree with you 100%. I think that you have to have something. Technically, he should do wounds, but you can't always count on it. So I think you need to have, and like I said, the 2 little 5-point items that you mentioned are excellent for that. Again, he's one of the few characters that can take Indomitable Will, and it's only 5 points. I've had mine disrupted and standing in the middle of the battlefield, gawking at the sky, waiting to die, because their nerve isn't very high. And so any little, even basic shooting like bows could sometimes waver him. And so, I mean, I would think that, maybe a 5-point magic item and maybe the Indomitable Will, I would think that'd be a pretty good. I mean, 100 points, that's not a bad investment, is it?
No, I don't think so. And so this is something where I just want to share a little bit. Looking under the hood, I've crunched the numbers on this a little bit. He definitely is more likely than not to do a point of damage against defense even 5 units. The question is how likely is he to fail to do any damage at all? And he's got about a 20-25% chance of completely whiffing.
Wow.
To me, that's not good enough. If you give him the items, it gets closer to 20%. If he's got Blade of the Beast Slayer and he's going after the right target, then it's closer to 10%. So that's where I get comfortable. I want my guys to have a 90% chance of doing 1 point of damage to even defense 5, and that the hero isn't there. Now, he's such a great deal. He does so much. I'm not saying don't take him. I'm saying it's tough to count on him. And one of the solutions to that is just to have more than one. And you can, you
Right.
can take 3 and they're cheap, So I do think that having a couple of them or having some other hero out there that has flying, that's going to do you a little better. Because like you said, he's not particularly tough. And like I said, he might not do the damage. So it's good to have a little bit of redundancy. It just goes back to that question of how many slots do I have, for these discount heroes, and what am I going to put in those slots?
For sure. And the thing is that you and I've spoken about a number of times, is that he could just be used as chaff to defend against a flank charge or something like that, because he's so quick. He can get in there,
sure.
And help defend your flank for a turn. I mean, he's not going to do any damage, but on the other hand, and since he's not an individual, they don't get they still go to get the overrun if they killed him. But I mean, you don't get the overrun and then attack overrun. That's what I'm trying to say. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think he's
not yielding.
No, he's not yielding. And so, I mean, that's what I think is a good use for him. I mean, most of our chaff units are 100 points anyway, correct? I mean, it's just, you could use him for the chaff as far as that's concerned.
Now they are.
And being nimble and everything
now
like
they're
that.
100 points.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. So it's like, why not use him in that dual role? And maybe, I mean, it just makes him more flexible.
Yeah.
I mean, you can use him however you want to use him, I guess. And that's the nice thing about him. He's not a great character hunter because he only has 3 swings. But he'd be all right killing war machines, with 3 swings. There's better options for killing characters and stuff than, obviously, the Pegasus. But, magic user, though, he does 1 wound and there's no spells coming next turn. So he does have a utility there. It's just not, he's just not going to be the killer that you really think he should be. He's just going to go in there and do his role. I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying. He's a role player. He's not a character that just dominates the battlefield.
He's a Swiss Army knife. Your Swiss Army knife isn't the best knife you own. It's not the best can opener you own. It's not the best corkscrew you own. It just happens to have all 3 on it. And he's really the reason that I keep saying you almost have no excuse to leave any hero slots unused, because for 90 points you could replace some junk chaff troop with a really, really flexible quote unquote chaff hero on a Pegasus. Why wouldn't you do that? He can go with your knights. He can be with your infantry. He can see over them and jump over them. He can go after war machines. And he's still real chaff. He's not yielding. And so it's very hard for me to see why any army shouldn't just, fill up any remaining hero slots on hero on Pegasus. Give one the blade, give one the mace, and
there you go.
If you still got another one, pick something random,
So let's talk about the wizard. To me, he is like one of the ultimate support characters for the Kingdoms of Men. There's just so many things that you can do with him. And the nice thing about our wizard is he starts at 50 points. If you've ever played Ratkin, your wizard starts at 90. If you've played Empire of Dust, your wizard starts at 100 with no spells. So, you know what I mean? At 50 points, he's a steal.
Yeah.
What did you tell us about?
No, I think he's great. I think.
What did you tell us about what we call the Gandalf wizard?
The Gandalf wizard is where I start with every army. I mean, I'm not saying that I have to take him, but I've never not taken him, and I don't feel bad about it. That's a 50-point wizard on a horse with lightning bolt, bane chant, and the inspiring talisman. If you have to have one guy that can do it all, that's it. He can bolster your guys, he inspires your guys, and he can pop a shot over your guys to force a nerve check if he has to, for the cool, clean, low points total of, I think, what about 115 now?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
I think it's pretty close.
It was 100 even, I think, before, or something like that. Now it's a little higher. We call him Gandalf because he's the wizard whose talent is inspiring others to do better. You know, he's got Bane Chant and the Inspiring Talisman. But that guy, if I had to pick one unit I don't want to go into battle without, that I just think is always worth his points, I can get those same benefits differently depending on how I configure my heroes. I'm not saying I literally have to take that guy, but I've still never not taken him. He's so good.
Yeah, and the thing is him operating with the, but you could have two units with Bane Chant when the enemy finally gets to the point of impact on you. I think that's powerful. I mean, I've spammed Bane Chant in my Goblin army to everybody's chagrin. Every time they turn around, the Goblins have crushing, and normally you can ignore that.
One thing we hadn't quite fleshed out talking earlier is I think both of us tend to default to this support line of characters where you've got the one Gandalf wizard and one army standard bearer with a loot, because they're both inspiring and they both give Bane Chant. And that's a really clean way to get those effects twice, and that's great for a Kingdoms of Men battle line. But we've seen other players that do the gaggle of wizards. You just take 3 wizards that are all good at something different, or just 3 50-point wizards just for the fireball or the lightning bolt, and they're just so effective for their points. Again, this is one of those things where if you've got extra slots for a hero, I don't know why you haven't filled it up with 50-point wizards or 70-point wizards with Bane Chant, because they're just so valuable.
Yeah, one of the wizards that I've kind of fallen in love with, I know that sounds awful, but one of the wizards, I really like the wizard replace the fireball with the lightning bolt and then have the boomstick, because to me he's just like having a unit of bows or something else, or maybe crossbows would be closer probably to his effectiveness. And plus the ability to move and shoot, the 360 firing, and you have to respect somebody that has those lightning bolts, and for only, I believe it's only 80 points, so that's a pretty dang good deal. I mean, because a unit of handgunners, for example, is probably 100, and so you get right into that level of usefulness with the guy with the boomstick.
I agree. I think he's a crazy great value for his points, especially when you consider the flexibility you just described. And it's very hard to look at any of our other shooting units, the mounted scouts or and the others, and see how they're better than a boomstick wizard. So it's tough not to take Gandalf and the boomstick guy in every army. It's just you can't do better with the points. It's just a question of how many hero slots you've got. I know I'm a broken record.
Yeah. And so, are there any other wizard spells that you think you would take? I mean, Wind Blast is an option in the list. Also, I really think you can make a very good heal wizard for your Kingdoms of Men army with the Shroud along with the just the heal spell. And I mean, it's not at the top of the line like some of the other races, but it's not bad at all.
I agree with that. I think that the heal is the third build that's interesting that's out there. To me, heal goes up in value when your guys are harder to wound. If it's tougher for the enemy to take a wound off me, then I get more value out of healing wounds. So an army that's made up mostly of knights or foot guard with shields or maybe pikemen, that guy I think then gets more value, especially if they're toting around stuff like the Aegis of the Elohi and stuff like that, so that the items kind of support that theme. That's my only thing is I do think you want like a defense 5 Kingdoms of Men, or defense 4 with -1 to hit type theme, so that you get the most value out of each point you heal. Now that said, hard to see why I shouldn't play a different army when I get there. Why am I not playing Basileia or something like that? So I don't often come up with Kingdoms of Men builds that I want to run that would fit that supporting wizard, if that makes sense.
Could you see using, I mean, the only other spell we haven't really spoken about is the Wind Blast. And I've never used Wind Blast for anything in any army. I could see how it would work, especially if I was fighting Northern Alliance and they got this stupid wild charge and I could knock them back a few inches so they can't get to me. But I think I'd rather just throw a lightning bolt at them than worry about pushing them backwards. What do you think?
I went through a period when I had a crush on Wind Blast, just as far as reading about what people said. If I were playing, at least in second ed, I think the Rordia list, the Halfling came with Wind Blast. I think it's kind of cool if you basically get it for free. I don't know that I would go after it and try to make a Wind Blast guy. And maybe someone smarter than me can tell me why I'm wrong on that. But that's not something I'm probably going to do.
No, me either. I mean, the one thing that I have noticed about the wizard is that we have no legendary spells like some of the other lists do, and I mean that's kind of a detriment. I mean, there's some of those legendary spells that would be really good support spells for our army, but we don't have them. So again, that's probably something that maybe they'll address in the future. They'll give us one support spell. So I'm hoping that'll be a future addition to the list.
I love your optimism. I think the future subtraction from the list is going to be taking a chunk out of our legendary artillery line.
Absolutely. The thing is that
I mean, they're not going to give us more shooting before they take away the cannons.
Well, one of the things that I noticed is that between second edition and this edition, I have not changed one iota what I run for characters, except that there's a new character which has totally turned upside down my use of characters. And I want to talk about the assassin. I've used him now, I know 5 games, and in every single game, Sean, he will get double or triple his points back for the investment. And you cannot, I mean, that is such an efficient unit. And when you first look at it, you're like, oh, it's not that good, then you start realizing all the things it can do. What do you think about the assassin?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that guy's psycho. And, again, this is a theme that's going to be repeated. I don't know how you could not take one, because he's capable of dishing out so much damage in melee. He's capable of dishing out so much damage ranged. Again, we're definitely clearly past that. Like, he's going to do 1 point of damage. 95% chance. It doesn't matter what he's shooting at. And so he's never useless because he didn't have the right, arc at the beginning of his turn for a charge. He's always going to do something. It's always going to be really significant. We're talking about characters because of their disruption potential. Well, this guy's got duelist out the bat. He gets so many abilities he doesn't have to use an item for. Vicious, all these, these missile attacks. He moves extra. He has duelist. This guy is nuts. The only hesitation I have is you can't put him on a horse. So I feel like his best use is probably combined with the Wings of Honey Maze or the scouting item.
Sure.
And have one each of those. So so I don't know that I want 3 assassins, but 1 or 2. And good grief, we know you can hold him in reserve and not do any of that anyway, because their characters are going to come after you if you're playing a Masters level event. And let me tell you, when 2 characters duke it out, the assassin's going to win.
Absolutely. And the same thing is that in his profile, the other thing you notice is he's stealthy. And since he's an individual and stealthy, it's -2 to shoot at him. So he can almost just stand in the middle of the table and flip the bird to the other army, shooting at you because of that ability. Yeah. And I mean, some of the other ones that I've seen for the goblins and for the ratkin, they have scout, or not scout, what is it called, pathfinder now, and with the wings on them, they can get a first turn charge. Now, we really can't get a first turn charge, but if you can move out the first turn, get somewhere toward the middle of the table into some cover, then that's when your mischief can start. Whether it's attacking, things, shooting things, and all these guys, like my buddy Vega with his general running around out there by himself, I would so dump on him with my assassin with the wings of Honeybase. He would be gone as quick as I could possibly make him gone. I mean, you got 10 swings for threes when you're fighting individuals. So, and again, I've had the bad experience of running these armies that have multiple individuals on horses, and they're coming after my cannons or after some other unit. And the assassin, he can jump out there and take them out, especially low-level heroes. He'll wipe them off the table just by himself. And if he doesn't, he's still standing there, keeping them from charging into your cannons or whatever else you have. So not only is he a really good offensive guy, he can actually be a decent defensive guy if the other people have lots of little individuals running around just to be annoying.
Yeah, I think it's the future of the game and the high-level play style of the game is to have all these characters. Then the meta call is to have these counter characters, and the assassin is our golden ticket for that. He's just so much packed into a little package. When I say little, I mean he's cheap. 80 points it might seem like a lot for Kingdoms of Men, but that's chump change for the amount of stuff he's got stacked onto one little 20 by 20 millimeter base.
I know, and I said that today to a friend of mine. He was talking about, what do orcs do? I know we're not talking about orcs, but what do orcs do about artillery? And I told him, take your skulk guy and give him the wings of Honeybase. He's going to scout, then he's going to charge on turn 1 to get rid of their artillery. Well, with our guy, we'll probably charge on turn 2 to kill their artillery. But once she's back there in the artillery line, he will kill one absolutely a turn. He can kill small units, especially like archer units, that can't really hurt him in return, swinging back. They just don't have a high to hit score. And like I said, I cannot believe how many points of units that I have taken out with him. Even if I just used him to charge into with my horde, I get 5 extra attacks, and he's usually good for 1 or 2 wounds to help my horde. You know what I mean? To help my horde break the enemy or to waver them. Yeah. And sometimes it's just that razor thin edge. Kingdoms of Men are so average. The extra 1 or 2 wounds, it's invaluable when it comes to that portion of the game.
Well, and I think you mean the later game, right? Where your units are battered and you force a nerve check, even if it's 1 damage. That gives them a chance of routing, and that's what matters. And I think that the best thing about the assassin, in terms of the feedback that I've heard and what I've seen, it's just that what you said. He's going to do something every turn. You've got so many units in this game that are only going to see 1 or 2 turns of action. Your missile units that might only get a turn or 2 of shooting, and your melee units that are going to march half the game and then fight. This guy is going to kill people from turn 1 to turn 6 or 7 if it goes long, and that's really something special. So I've said this about a lot of units, but I think at least one assassin might be an auto include. And as far as him not being able to charge on turn 1, versus artillery, I'll say this: Kingdoms of Men, we're the kings of artillery. I'm not worried about not being able to get to your artillery fast enough. I'll just shoot it with mine.
Absolutely. I really want to talk about my other favorite character in the list now, and that's the captain. And I kind of neglected him in the last edition, but then all of a sudden he came out in the last edition, I think, with Rally 2. Well, he doesn't have Rally 2 anymore. But when you saw his abilities and then the rally, he's just like if you're going to use a general on a horse, you might as well just use the captain because of all the abilities that he has. And lately in my infantry list, my captain just stands back there with where my ASB used to stand, and he basically fills that entire role. I mean, he's got the very inspiring, he gives rally. I mean, you're starting to shift units that are, like a unit of of Kingdoms of Men infantry with a nerve of 24. I mean, you're like dwarfs at that level. I mean, you've got this high nerves, and you really could form an infantry line that is almost, I'm not going to say unbreakable, but it is darn hard to shift out, with that good a leadership there and the rally.
Yeah, he does make your battle line feel more like an elite army's battle line. If you take the good Kingdoms of Men units and he's behind it does feel a little bit more like you're a quote unquote real army and not a dumb, weak human army. And that's he's how you get there. Now, what makes me unsure about him is just, when I compare him to the general. He's got mighty, he's got good attacks, he's got the inspiring, so there's a lot of overlap. What he's adding is the rally and the redeploy. Stick a pin in the redeploy for a second. Really, I'm comparing his rally to whatever the general would get by taking an item. And if the general's item is elusive insatiable darkness, and I had that, free still, I don't know which is better. What do you think? I mean, do I want rally 1 or do I want main chance?
I know. I mean, that's what I say. There's where you just kind of, you're not making a bad choice either way. And the thing is the way I look at it is sometimes, and it's something that we were just talking about earlier, you can leave the ASB out of the list if you've got the captain back there behind the line, because he acts in that role. And plus, like I said, the rally makes him very versatile. But again, your point is if you put the general back there, well, I mean, we were saying general, but on the other hand, an ASB with the loot does just as good a job as the general standing back there.
The general can fight too, though.
I know, but I mean,
breaks through, general will kill him.
But I mean, and they're both mighty. It's hard to say. I mean, lately I've been running him, like I said, just to back up my infantry line and just let him stand back there and be the Rock of Gibraltar. I lost a unit of foot guard the other day. Guy charged through. The captain just stood there right by himself with his mighty and kept them from turning the flank, from getting in a position to charge another unit in the flank because of mighty. And I mean, it's strong. And the thing is because he has a decently high leadership. Of course, all the generals should. It's hard to get enough wounds on him, with his armor 5, unless you just have an uber unit. A lot of times he's not going to. He's tough enough that he can handle it, for at least one turn. And he might not do 2, but he can do 1. So, I mean, he's essentially a regiment, right? I mean, as far as morale, like an average regiment by himself.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's an armor 5 regiment by
Okay,
himself.
so I think he can take on, supporting sort of troop class supporting units to get back in your camp. I mean, the general or the captain, it can win. I mean,
Sure.
he can fight them and win. It's different than a hero where we don't know if he'll even hit.
Yeah, there's that. And the thing is that I don't really think that you make unlike the assassin, which I think I kind of came out to the auto include level. I think honestly, if I was just wanting to make sure my infantry line was fine, I'd do just like I did the last game and put my ASB there with loot and take my chances, on my line. I just have found that the captain, with that extra point of rally, just makes a huge difference. I mean, you're getting a unit like pikemen. You literally cannot break a unit of pikemen if the general is standing behind them with rally. I mean, it just doesn't. It's just not going. I mean, they're hard to stop and get rid of anyway. But with him, I mean, they become, oh my gosh, you can't hardly hit him. And then he's sitting there, we did 10 wounds, and then all of a sudden he said, oh yeah, but I got rally, so you really need to have done 14, which you can't do. So you know what I'm saying? It just keeps him there.
Yeah.
And if you get in a pinch, you charge him into that same fight and add 2 to 3 wounds, and tip the fight your way. So, like I said, I don't think you really go wrong with either one or any of those choices. It's just a question of what you want the rest of your army, what you're saving points for. Like if I wanted to save points, I would just do the ASB with the loot. Because I want to spend points on an assassin, because I know the assassin is going to give me points back. He is going to be points well spent. If he was to die on the first turn, I think I would almost concede. Just because he's so good and the disruption he can cause. But
hey, look, we've already praised the assassin. I want to ask you a question.
What?
That we skipped the big subject because everyone gets excited about the captain because of the redeploy,
Right.
the D3 units. What do you think about that? What's your advice to new players? Should you get him and hope you'll roll a 3 and totally redo everything? What's the skinny on that?
Well, I think I would really want to at least roll a 2. And I tell you why. Let's say that I set up my cavalry and the other guy threw his pikeman in front of me or the deployment. And
Yeah.
I want to get the cavalry somewhere else, and then maybe put like my foot guard in front of his pikeman or his phalanx unit, because they'll hack them down. So I mean, I like that, and I also think that the other advantage of it is, let's say, I remember in the last edition you played with a horde of arquebusiers, and let's say that somebody deployed.
Don't remind me.
I know, but I mean, just say somebody deployed an unfavorable unit in front of them. The ability to redeploy that unit over to where they really matter would be huge. I mean, all of a sudden they go from being useless to all of a sudden they could dominate the game, literally. And I think that's the advantage of it. And to me, a general on a horse is 120 points. The captain's 120 points. And then you get all the extra abilities. So,
Yeah.
you know, the bad thing about it is, Sean, and I'll just tell you this honestly, I always forget to use the damn thing to redeploy because I'm pretty solid in my deployment over the years to kind of know what I want to do every time. But I could see, you know, throwing my giant back to the flank of my infantry line to maybe defend against a big monster or something. But I mean, I could see the flexibility of it, and it could really be a game-winning thing just to have that one ability to just get rid of that one unit and put it back where it really needs to be.
Yeah, I think that you're right that, rolling 2 and being able to swap 2 units, to put a hand, switch through your hammer and your anvilar or something like that. I mean, that's the best way to do it, but it almost seems to me like you really just, when you're deploying, you should just count on rolling a 1, and if there are 2 places you're thinking about putting your knights, for example, just try to leave the other one open. Because you can't count on rolling a 2.
No.
And if you want the value out of it, you've got to kind of plan ahead, plan to fail, so to speak, and just say, okay, well, here's going to be this gap over here, and if he screws me up on the deployment, then and I can always move my handgunners or whatever. That's what seems to me, but I haven't actually used him, so it's all just talk.
Well, I mean, the thing is that he can also redeploy a cannon or something somewhere better. Shooting unit. I mean, like I said, I would deploy. You have to. To me, you have to have a plan for that redeploy. Like if I roll a 1, maybe I can move my giant. If I roll a 2, maybe I'm going to swap my pikemen for my knights. You see what I mean? And then if you roll 3, I don't even know how you would plan to roll 3. So that would just be a fluke, in my opinion.
Yeah, 1 or 2, yeah.
And I look at him and I'm thinking I would like him. But I can't think of any way to possibly use it because I think really the assassin would do most of the things I want the Fanatic instigator to do. And the other thing they didn't do, I mean, I thought maybe that the Fanatic instigator would be like in the last edition where he could at least inspire fanatics. I mean, that would just seem like like an automatic thing that you would have added to it. But they didn't do that. So he's basically this lone guy that doesn't do anything except fight really, really well with low armor, and he has wild charge. So, what do you think about it?
Same. He's a melee damage dealing hero. He's sort of feels like half of what you get out of the assassin. He can dish it out in melee, but he can't shoot, and the shooting really makes the assassin well rounded. As we've talked, any turn you can't charge something good, he can shoot something good. The instigator can't. He also can't get on a horse, so he can't move anywhere fast. He's mighty, and that's great. So I think he'd be perfectly fine if you gave him Wings of Honey Maze or Pathfinder or something like that. But I struggle to see myself taking him over other choices that accomplish those same roles. Again, I have to give the assassin the Wings of Honey Maze, and he can do more than the instigator. Or if I want someone who's mighty, I would take a hero on a Pegasus or a general on a horse that I could do more things with because they can reach out further. So I think he's neat. The idea is interesting. I'm betting they'll try to do something to make him cooler next time they roll out a Clash of Kings or something like that. But I just don't see how I would take him right now.
Yeah, I agree. And on top of that, he's 5 points more expensive than the assassin, which I know is not a decision maker
Right.
for me. But I'm like, I can swing 5 times or I can shoot 5 times. With him, I could swing 6 times, and armor wise, they're exactly identical. So there's no real. I mean, to me, there's not even a decision. I mean, I've got a cool
No,
model for the
yeah,
Fanatic instigator, but he is basically going to stay in the on the shelf for me, unless, like you say, I was playing some.
I've got a great model. I've got a great model for him too. But unless he's my fourth assassin,
Right.
I would take my first assassin and my second assassin and my third assassin before I took an instigator.
That's right.
I just want to thank everyone for listening to our musings about the Kingdoms of Men, one of our favorite armies. Sean and I were both former Empire players back in the Warhammer days and just loved the versatility of that army. It wasn't the best army in the game for sure, but yeah, I think it's a pretty decent army in Kings of War 3rd edition. I really think it's better than the 2nd edition army was, and I'm hoping to use it a lot more in some of my battle reports and maybe even take it to a tournament this year. But anyway, thank you. I hope you've learned something. I hope that you tune in again. The next one we're going to do, we're probably going to do one on Rordia and then perhaps one just on tactics alone. So just keep watching on Facebook for us, and hopefully we will get one done soon for you. Thank you.